Painting a new construction home is nothing like repainting an existing house. So in this video, I'm going to show you why it's so different and step by step how to do it yourself. Now the house I'm painting in this video is huge and it's in the neighborhood of 5,300 square feet. I mention this because I'm going to be painting this entire thing by myself with just a little bit of help from my wife, mostly just so that I had someone to film. Now, I mention this because that means that if I can handle this job by myself, you can probably handle yours, especially if you get some help from some friends and family. There's going to be a lot of supplies and tools needed for this job. If you take the time to check out the video description, I have a complete list of everything I recommend and the exact things you'll see me using. Let's begin with the prep work. The very first thing I do is come in and paint the tops of the doors, because the warranty on most doors is only valid if all sides of it have been painted. We'll eventually take these doors off the hinges and sit them on these painted tops in order to be able to spray the bottoms with the rest of the door. I know someone is going to mention that many door bottoms will be cut off to make room for the flooring eventually, so why bother painting the bottom? But here's my experience. If a door is going to warp, it's usually warping prior to the stage where the trim guys shave the bottoms off. Therefore, most doors are warranted for warpage while all sides are already painted by me. And trust me, door quality has gone down a lot over the years. So if you want to protect yourself, go ahead and paint this. While those door tops are drying, it's time to start filling nail holes and trim. I like to use Painter's Putty 53 for this job. You can get by with just using a good paintable caulk, but sometimes there can be issues with shrinking. Whatever you do, don't use wood filler because it will harden and require sanding to get smooth. That'll take you forever to get this job done if you use that. A lot of people will go ahead and caulk all of the trim to the walls right now, and I'm not against doing that, particularly if you have a team of people helping you. I, however, wait to caulk until I have primed everything because it's easier to see if I caulked adequately against white primered surfaces. The shadows of the uncaulked areas are easier to spot against the white. By now, the door top should be dry, so it's time to remove each door from its frame and take it somewhere to be painted. In my case, I did this in the basement of the house. You may find that the garage is a good location for you. I write the location of each door on the top or bottom. That way, when I go to rehang them, I don't have to spend time measuring and figuring out which one goes where. I remove each hinge and place each door upside down so they are resting on the painted edge. Then I fasten them in an accordion pattern using scrap boards so that I can continuously paint them one after another without stopping. Once they are set up, it's time to spray a primer coat on them. I highly recommend the Graco Magnum X7 sprayer that I'm using here. It provides a pro quality finish and is a reliable machine that I have used on multiple houses, yet it's sold at a DIY price. I'll put a link to it in the video description. I'm also going to link to some must-have accessories like a whip kit and various spray tips. Depending on how much space you have, you may want to continue working on the doors until all are finished and can be rehung. I had the space to wait to do additional coats, so I moved on to prepping all the cabinet doors and drawers. As I remove each drawer, I will write its location on the back in an unpainted spot, which makes it way easier to reinstall later. I will also remove the guides to prevent getting paint on them later. When I remove cabinet doors, I also remove the hinges and write their locations where the hinge will cover it. Then I place a tiny piece of masking tape over it so my markings don't get painted over. Here's how I prepare the cabinet doors for painting. To paint all these cabinet doors, I'm going to need to be able to hang them. So I'm going to prepare them for hanging by drilling holes in the top side of top cabinet doors and the bottom side of bottom cabinet doors. With those pilot holes drilled, I can now put these little hooks in the cabinets, and I'll be able to hang them using coat hangers. After the cabinet doors, I remove the cabinet shelves and write their locations on the back edge. I do not paint the inside of cabinet drawers, as I think the wood surface holds up better and looks better unpainted. To accomplish this, I'll place smaller drawers in garbage bags and tape them closed. With larger drawers, I'll use a 3M hand masker tool to tape off the drawers in a way that paint won't get inside. I have a link to one of these in the description of this video. I have a lot of cabinets to paint in this large house. I'll end up laying them out something like this so that I can access all around them and paint them in batches. For this house, it took up several rooms. This next bit of prep work is optional. Many people choose to paint the inside of their cabinets, but others choose to tape off the inside and leave a natural finish. I normally tape mine off, but on this case, I decided to only tape off this one for demonstration purposes, choosing instead to try out painting the inside of the other cabinets. Tell you what though, on future jobs, I'll probably go back to taping off cabinets because I find it's very easy to get runs when spraying in such confined spaces. Using that hand masker I used earlier on the larger drawers, I also tape off windows in any rooms where I'll be spraying paint. This will cut down on a lot of the natural light in the house, so if you're going to start by just spraying cabinet doors and drawers, you may choose to only tape off the windows near where you'll be spraying. I mask windows by taping off 4 sides of the rectangle and then cutting a piece of clear plastic sheeting for the center so some light still gets in. Everyone has their own method. Figure out what works for you. I also use plastic bags to block off all ceiling vents and air returns. Many painters don't do this, but it's an easy thing that provides a much better finished product. The last bit of prep before spraying is giving the area a thorough cleaning so you don't shoot dust all over everything. I don't broom sweep because I don't want to put things in the air. Instead, I vacuum everywhere near where we will be spraying. To spray my cabinet doors and shelves, I set up my own rig using ladders and metal pipes. I then use small hooks and metal hangers to hang the doors from the pipes as I spray. This is another one of those things where you just have to plan ahead and work with what you got. The first coat is a primer. I like to start with shelves since the finish on these is more forgiving and it gives me time to ensure my spray pattern is perfect. In my case, due to the pricing of Sherwin-Williams at the moment, I chose to use Promar 400 Flat White as the primer in this house. That's not always the most economical choice. And to be honest, I have mixed feelings about Sherwin-Williams in general, but in the rural area where this house is located, it was the only pro paint store around. After I finished spraying each piece, I moved to a different area to hang dry. Here I am, spraying drawers. Don't forget that you'll spend about 10 to 15 minutes cleaning your equipment every time you stop spraying or need to change products. I'll put a link to some must-have cleaning supplies in the video description as well. Once all doors and drawers are drying, it's time to start priming the cabinet frames. As I mentioned earlier, be careful inside the cabinets as it's easy to put your coat on too thick in such a confined space. Once finished there, I usually move on to ceilings. But don't forget, if you haven't already, prep all windows and vacuum all rooms where you'll be spraying. I use an extension tip on my spray gun to help me with ceilings. That way I don't have to use ladders. It's worth every penny. Choose the length of it based on your height and the ceiling height. Because I use Promar 400 as my primer, which is the same paint that I will use to finish my ceiling, I am able to prime the walls and baseboards while putting final coats on the ceiling. In most cases, you'll want to back roll the ceiling after spraying it. Needless to say, at this point, I will prime everything in the house that hasn't already been primed. Ceilings will get 2 additional coats so that they'll be completely finished. With priming complete, it's time to caulk everything that hasn't been caulked. This will be a big job as you need to caulk all shelving, baseboards, crown molding, cabinet faces, etc., etc. Once you finish that monumental task, you can start sanding. Woodwork, cabinets, shelving, doors, they all get sanded between coats. If you skip this step, these items will have a rough, unprofessional feel. You don't have to sand anything excessively, just a quick once over. I use a drywall pole sander on baseboards to speed things up. An orbital or palm sander makes quick work of flat surfaces like shelving and cabinet faces. After sanding, it's important to vacuum everywhere again. I then use tack cloths to wipe down all the sanded surfaces. It's time to talk about the paints I'll be using from here on out. You're going to want the best possible paint for your cabinets. And if your budget allows, you may choose to use that paint on all of your woodwork. There are many options for cabinet paint. In the past, oil paint was king, but that's gotten extremely difficult to find. Plus it has some significant downsides. Nowadays, water-based urethanes seem to be in vogue. I'm using Sherwin-Williams Pro Industrial water-based alkyd urethane enamel, but I would take the recommendations of the counter guys at your local pro paint store. I'm happy with this product, but I'm not in love with it. And I will probably never use it for black finishes again because it was a nightmare to dry in this high humidity. In my case, I sprayed all cabinets and shelving with that Pro Industrial urethane stuff. But then I sprayed all woodwork with a cheaper Sherwin-Williams latex paint called Solo. And I did this to help my budget. Walls in this house will receive Promar 200 paint, which isn't my favorite wall paint, but it is budget friendly. It's now time to shoot additional coats of paint on cabinet doors and drawers, as well as doors. I follow the same basic routine of spraying, sanding, vacuuming, tack clothing, and then repeating. The number of coats will depend on your budget and the time you are willing to invest, but these will require an absolute minimum of 2 top coats. Once those are finished and stored, I can paint all cabinet frames and shelving. Again, I'll follow that routine of spraying, sanding, vacuuming, tack clothing, and then repeat. In a smaller house, I'd probably include spraying all the woodwork in each coat, but this house has so many cabinets and shelving that I wasn't able to spray trim at the same time. Once cabinets and shelving were finished, I then switched paints and sprayed several coats on all the woodwork. It's fine that I'm overspraying onto the walls, but I did need to make sure that I didn't get paint on the ceiling because there's a different sheen to those 2 different types of paint. To accomplish this, you can either hand paint crown molding or use a shield like I did. Once you have finished all the trim throughout the house, it's now finally time to tear off most of that masking tape. I love letting the light back in. It's a well-needed brightness after so many long hours of labor. Plus, it'll help me see better as I begin to paint the walls. Isn't it crazy? When most people hear you painted your own house, they picture starting at this phase, the walls. But oh my gosh, most of the work happened before you even got to this point. You're practically almost done. I think this is one of the reasons painters don't get the respect they deserve. Everyone says, I painted my own house, sometimes multiple times. But all they are referring to is putting on a few coats of paint on the walls. There's a significant debate over whether it's best to cut in first or roll first. In my experience, it doesn't make a significant difference. I usually, however, cut in first. Most people already know this, but there's no need to tape anything off when cutting in. As for rolling, I use a rolling attachment for my sprayer, and it really does speed up the job. Again, I'll link to it in the video description. For stairwells, I use a wide board and a ladder to rig up my own makeshift scaffolding. It's not as squirrely as it looks, I promise. Once you finish getting a couple coats on the walls, the only thing you have left to do is stain work. I usually wait to do that until after floors are in, just because if I have a staircase to stain, I'd rather not have the flooring guys beating it up. So we are done. Pat yourself on the back. Not only will you have the satisfaction of knowing you saved some serious cash, you also know the job was done right. I hope this video helped you in one way or another. If it did, would you mind clicking subscribe? I appreciate you.